Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. We are talking about a story that I think has captured everyone. I mean, every sports fan has an opinion on Lane Kiffin, what happened in the lead up to Sunday, what happened on Sunday, what happened going forward. And so let's just go ahead and dive 2 feet in to this conversation. It is one of the craziest stories I've ever seen, okay? So as we record, Lane Kiffin, I believe, is actually on an airplane to Baton Rouge. He has officially accepted the LSU head coaching job. He is officially not coaching Ole Miss in the playoffs. By the way, Pete Golding, what a plot twist, is now the full-time head coach at Ole Miss going forward. This is one of the craziest stories I've ever seen, but I think more than anything, what it speaks to is this, is that, listen, there's going to be a day, probably tomorrow, probably on Monday, where we start talking about Lane Kiffin, LSU football head coach, and what he can do for that program. To me, is not that day, though. To me, today, the story is pretty straightforward. This is maybe the ugliest exit we've ever seen. This is maybe the ugliest exit we ever will see. And there is only one person to blame. It's nobody at Ole Miss. It's nobody at the NCAA. It has nothing to do with the calendar. It is 100% on Lane Kiffin, who I believe acted like an embarrassing, excuse me, right in the middle of my rant. I feel like Lane Kiffin acted like an embarrassing, petulant child who wouldn't get his way. And so I'm not here to defend Lane Kiffin. I'm not here to make you feel sorry because of the calendar or the... No. Lane Kiffin has acted like a child, and 2 things can be true. He is a great football coach, and we will evaluate him at LSU on what he does on the field. But his exit from Ole Miss is the ugliest exit I have ever seen. And that's saying something for a guy that left Tennessee under literal riot conditions, okay? And so by now we don't have to go through a lot of the semantics of everything that has happened. But I will say this, part of the reason we did not go live on Sunday morning was because he had that meeting set for 9 p.m. Central Time. And I knew in my head, I said, that's not happening in the manner that it is, okay? So let's go ahead and just big picture what happened, big picture what it means, okay? So first of all, listen, let's give credit to a few variables here. One, we knew coming into Friday that Lane Kiffin, we expected a decision from him on Saturday, right? Regardless of what happened in the Egg Bowl, it had clearly been established that Lane Kiffin, if he did not commit long-term to Ole Miss, was not going to be the head coach for the college football playoff. Keith Carter, the AD, made that abundantly clear in his statement about 10 days or so ago now. And so we all knew what the stakes were going into the Egg Bowl. Credit to Ole Miss, they get the win. And I can be critical of Lane Kiffin off the field, but on the field, he had his team ready to go. They were the deserving Egg Bowl champs, and I believe they are a deserving college football playoff team, something that we're absolutely going to discuss here in a few minutes, okay? All right, we're going to get back to the video that you're watching in just a second, but before we do, let's be honest, being a college football fan in 2025, yeah, it'll age you fast. Your team stinks. You need a new head coach. Where's all the buyout money coming from? College football these days will leave you with a lot of wrinkles. But just because your team lets you down doesn't mean you can't keep that skin glowing. And I want to welcome a new partner to the Aaron Torres pod, Hanley, which makes uncomplicated skincare routines for men that actually work. So listen, even if your football team has you stressed, doesn't mean you can't still look good. I got the face wash right here. Hanley sent it to me. It works like a charm. I'm using it every day. Oh, by the way, we got the eye cream right here. Yeah, when you're looking at message boards all night long into the early morning hours, you're going to get some crow's feet. You need the eye cream. Hanley, love this about them. They use quality science-backed ingredients, and they ship everything you need right to your door each month. It's skincare made simple, no guesswork, no fancy nonsense. Even better, listen, we're approaching the holidays, and the bottom line is you're trying to find some gift ideas for you, for friends, for family. Well, guess what, fellas? This is the perfect gift to get you looking good into 2026. Maybe you got a new head coach. Maybe you'll be showing up for the press conference. You want to look good. Ladies, isn't this sort of the gift that's for him, but also for you as well? That's Tiege Hanley. Best part is, though, Tiege Hanley is taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod with a very special offer. You can get 40% off your first box plus a free $20 gift. All you got to do is click the link in the description or pin comment to grab the deal. Again, 40% off your first box plus a free $20 gift. All you got to do is click the link in the description or the pin comment to take advantage of that deal. Trust me, your skin or whoever you get Tiege Hanley for, great gift again for the fellas in your life. Everybody's going to thank you. Your team might have you stressed, but there's no reason that you have to look it. Thank you to Tiege Hanley. Take advantage of the offer. We appreciate their support of the Aaron Torres pod. What also cannot be denied is that basically everything that has happened since the second the Egg Bowl finished has been a complete S show, okay? Probably started, I guess it would be, in the post game. It wasn't even the post game. I think it was on the field when Lane Kiffin is going after a reporter. Apparently a reporter called him a hoe, or he claims the reporter called him a hoe. The reporter defended himself. He said, I didn't call him a hoe. I said he was acting like a hoe. So that happens. Then we get into Saturday. We're waiting for this decision. And I'll even defend Lane Kiffin a little bit, right? Is that it was clear two things. One, that with the Texas A&M loss on Friday, there was the possibility that Ole Miss was going to play for an SEC title. And so you started to hear the rumors of he brought his staff into the office. They're starting game prep on Georgia, who they would have played in the SEC championship game if Alabama had lost the Iron Bowl. What also became apparent was that he was kicking the can down the road, trying to avoid the inevitable. It was clear by the end of the day, he was not coming back to Ole Miss. And I think what became clear, I'll give Ross Dellinger from Yahoo a ton of credit. I thought he had the best details on this story. There was a meeting between Keith Carter, the AD, between Lane Kiffin, and between the school president. And basically the subtext, if you read Ross Dellinger's report, was pretty straightforward. That subtext was Lane Kiffin wants to coach in the college football playoff. Ole Miss has drawn the line in the sand. They have said no, and he is throwing a fit like a big little baby. Okay, I don't know if he could be a big and little baby, but whatever baby you want. If it's a big baby, if it's a little baby, give him a pacifier, give him a bottle, because that's how he was acting. And then it obviously went to another level on Sunday morning. We're supposed to get this meeting. It doesn't happen. And then guess what starts to get reported? Lane Kiffin, who clearly has lost all leverage, he's not going to get his way, he's not getting what he wants, is now threatening to pull the entire offensive staff on the plane with him and basically pillage the coaching staff going into the college football playoff for Ole Miss. Even if he wasn't going to be there, this moment should have been a celebration for one of the greatest accomplishments, maybe the greatest accomplishment in Ole Miss football history. You know, I've heard reports, people believe this might be the greatest moment in the history of Mississippi sports. Well, I bring it up because it has largely been ruined by Lane Kiffin. So that's what happened on Saturday into Sunday. By Sunday afternoon, we saw the videos of Lane Kiffin getting on a plane. We saw his statement, and I want to spend half a second to read his statement. And it is worth noting, by the way, that Pete Golding has officially been named the head coach at Ole Miss. That isn't even as an intern, but that is as a permanent head coach. But let's go ahead. I want to read, to me, Lane Kiffin, what he said and what it means, because to me, it is very clear that this guy has not changed at all. Okay, so this was a statement from Lane Kiffin. I did not send it to Matt, so I apologize. It's not on your screen right now. Lane Kiffin sent out this message at 3:03 Eastern time on Sunday. After a lot of prayer and time spent with family, I made the difficult decision to accept the head coaching position at LSU. I was hoping to complete a historic 6-season run with this year's team by leading Ole Miss through the playoffs, capitalizing on the team's incredible success and their commitment to finish strong and investing in everything into a playoff run with guardrails in place to protect the program in any areas of concern. My request to do so was denied by Keith Carter, despite the team also asking him to allow me to keep coaching them so they could better maintain their high level of performance. Unfortunately, that means Friday's Egg Bowl was my last game coaching the Rebels. He wrapped by saying, well, I'm looking forward to starting to a new start with a unique opportunity at LSU. I will forever cherish the incredible 6 years I spent at Ole Miss and will be rooting hard for the team to complete their mission and bring a championship to Oxford. So listen, again, I apologize that we don't have that statement on the screen, but at the same time, just listen to what Lane Kiffin said. I was hoping to complete a historic 6-run season with this year's team by leading Ole Miss through the playoffs, capitalizing on the team's incredible success, blah, 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 blah. My request to do so was denied by Keith Carter, despite the team also asking him to allow me to do so. Listen, I could go on. I could read that statement a second, third, and fourth time. But if you read the statement and if you read the subtext around the statement, what Lane Kiffin is trying to tell you is pretty clear. Don't blame me. I'm not the bad guy. I wanted to finish what I started. Well, I'm going to say the exact opposite. There is only one bad guy in this situation. It is Lane Kiffin. And as I said, this is as ugly of a departure as I ever remember. Okay, so a few things are true. Let's go ahead and dive in. Let's switch gears to, I gave you the context. Let's talk about what's happening now, okay? One, I have said from the beginning, Lane Kiffin should do what is best for himself and his family. And if that's going to LSU, that's fine. If that's going to Florida, it's fine. You know, if he wanted to go coach my alma mater, UConn, I would have gladly accepted and probably contributed a little bit to NIL, okay? But the one thing I also said was this, is that there is a right way to do things. There is a wrong way to do things. And the way that Lane Kiffin planned on doing things clearly wasn't going to hold up. Because I remember talking about this 3-4 weeks ago. And Ole Miss fans are like, listen, he has a standard. He will not talk about other jobs or consider other jobs until after the season. I said, listen, he can do whatever he wants. That ain't how it's going to work. Because as the weeks went on, the questioning started getting more aggressive, and it was clear he was going to have to release a statement, okay? And he was going to have to make a decision, and he was not going to be allowed to coach deep into the playoffs. And so to me, I don't blame Ole Miss. I don't blame the calendar. I blame Lane Kiffin because he should do whatever he wants, but he should also understand this. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. And, you know, I think I said this on the last full show we did, Thursday, Friday of last week, whatever. I guess it would have been Wednesday of last week. I can't remember. But what I said is that to whom much is given, much is expected. And if you want to take the LSU job, you should take the LSU job. But just because you've accepted the LSU job or you want to accept the LSU job does not mean that Ole Miss is in any way obligated to allow you to coach the team, okay? And so let's go ahead and dive in because I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding because, listen, go ahead. Go find the last 3 or 4 days. I thought it was an embarrassing about 4 or 5 day stretch for the media. First of all, it is worth noting, let's just get it out of the way. Seemingly every prominent media member is represented by CAA and maybe Jimmy Sexton as well, who is also Lane Kiffin's agent. So I don't know if Jimmy Sexton is orchestrating this, but the bottom line is the messaging from the big voices in college football was pretty clear. This isn't Lane Kiffin's fault. It's the calendar's fault. And what's the harm in letting him finish the job? Well, listen, I wish that the whole world was rainbow and sunshine and pots of gold at the end of the rainbow. But that ain't the real world, and it was never realistic to let Lane Kiffin finish the job. Why is that? For people who don't understand, why can't he just finish the job? Let me just lay it out for you as simply as I can, okay? Wednesday of this week is high school national signing day. In other words, it's the day all these high school stars sign their letters of intent and we find out where they're going to play college next year, okay? Can you imagine those players that are committed to Ole Miss right now that had Lane Kiffin not decided to leave would have signed with Ole Miss? Now imagine a world where Lane Kiffin is still the head coach of Ole Miss, but also has agreed to become the head coach of LSU going forward. Imagine being one of those players, right? You're committed to Ole Miss, but you want to play for Lane Kiffin, and you really committed to play for Lane Kiffin. Now imagine the situation that Lane Kiffin is putting himself in, Ole Miss in, and those kids in, right? Because imagine if he is the head coach at Ole Miss and he's also like, oh, by the way, don't sign here. I'm leaving in a couple weeks. And maybe he doesn't explicitly say that, but that would be the insinuation. By the way, I'm guessing we have some Tennessee fans in the chat. Everybody remembers how it ended at Tennessee. If you remember, he left for USC, and you probably don't remember, but he left for USC on the first day of the semester, or I believe it was the day going into the first day of the semester. And Coach O, who was on his staff and was clearly going with him to USC, was literally texting recruits, do not show up at class tomorrow. Because once you show up at class, you're committed to Tennessee throughout this semester. If you don't go, you can follow us to USC. You're not technically enrolled at Tennessee. And so imagine the predicament that Ole Miss is in. You have a guy who is actively recruiting for Ole Miss, coaching your team. You have high school signees signing this week. And then here is the other thing that I've mentioned 2, 3, 4 times. Why you cannot have Lane Kiffin coaching Ole Miss in the playoff while he is verbally or signed a contract with LSU is that, guess what? He also has access to a roster full of players that he is then going to decide who he wants to recruit and who he doesn't want to LSU. And so all of a sudden, you're game planning. Let's just say hypothetically, Ole Miss plays Oregon in round 1 of the playoff. I don't know what's going to happen, right? Let's say you lose to Oregon in round 1. Now, all of a sudden, does Lane Kiffin, that same guy that he was coaching on Friday, Saturday morning, flip on the LSU hat and say, hey, follow me to Baton Rouge, plane leaves in an hour? Like, that is what we are talking about, but you can't give him access to your entire roster carte blanche for a minimum of 2 more weeks, if not more. Remember, Ole Miss doesn't play for 2 more weeks, okay? So you can't have him in the facility. You can't have him in meetings. You can't have him, walking down the hallway and winking and nodding and whispering in somebody's ear, hey, we got a spot for you in this much NIL money at LSU. It does not work. It was never going to work. And that is why I give Ole Miss so much credit in this situation. Listen, I saw Herbstreit, and I like Herbstreit. I think right now it's kind of, trendy to just kind of crush Herbstreit for everything he says. But I heard Herbstreit say on College Game Day on Saturday, Ole Miss is being emotional about this. Let him finish the season. No, it's actually quite literally the exact opposite. Ole Miss actually took all the emotion out of it. The easy emotional thing to do would have been to kind of have, high school prom, and the prom they play, at the end of the prom they play "Hope You Had the Time of Your Life." Like it would have been easy for Keith Carter to be playing "Time of Your Life" by Green Day on YouTube and sitting there saying, you know what? Let him finish this. This is the best season in school history. Let him do it. Okay. That's actually what the emotional part would have been. I actually give Ole Miss credit. I think they took the emotion completely out of it and said, no. This is a bottom line business. We're trying to win a championship, and everyone that's in this building needs to be fully focused on that. Not busy hiring a staff, not busy recruiting, not busy recruiting our own roster. Again, just think about this. Ole Miss won't play for 3 more weeks. I think I said 2. It's 3. There's a week between now and the conference championships. Then there's a week between the conference championships and a bye week for everyone. And then the playoff starts a week after that. So 3 weeks where he's essentially at LSU, putting together a staff, retaining players, talking to players. How can you I'll actually switch it and make the exact opposite argument. How can you actually expect him to keep the Ole Miss job and do that job? Surprise, surprise. Being the LSU head football coach is a full-time job. It's not a part-time job that you do in passing. And oh, by the way, you're game planning for a playoff game during that same time. And so you weren't going to be able to give full-time commitment to either one. You were obviously, with National Signing Day coming up, going to be focused on helping LSU put together the best possible class that you can. Where in the world are you going to have time to be focused on helping Ole Miss try to win a national championship? And so Ole Miss, I actually think, took all of the emotion out of it. I think they did the exact opposite. I think they said, we're taking the emotion out of it and we're focused fully on winning this national championship and moving forward. I think it was Lane Kiffin who was the emotional one, who was whining and complaining and stamping his feet. Why won't you let me finish? This isn't fair. Life's not fair. No, life is fair. The life is, you have a $13 million a year job behind door one, and you have a $13 million a year job behind door two. What you cannot do is choose what's behind both doors. Whatever. Whatever. You have kids, right? You can either get, the new this for Christmas or the new that. But mom and dad only have a budget for both. Well, I want both. Well, I don't care if you want both. You're not getting both. And that's all this came down to. And all Lane Kiffin did was be a petulant child. And I think to make it worse is that, listen, I understand that there was no way that he could have ended this in great fashion. I think in a perfect world, there's a way. He takes the job he wants. He finishes. That's not possible. And instead, all he did was blow up any minuscule legacy that he had at Ole Miss, and maybe he doesn't care. And that's totally okay, and it's his prerogative and whatever. But at the same time, when not only is the school not letting you coach, but now you're actively trying to submarine everything that you've built over the last couple years, that's not only bad, it's embarrassing. When you're saying, I'm going to pillage your staff, when you're telling staff members, some of these guys and girls are very highly compensated, but some of them are making 60, 70, 80,000 a year. And I'm not saying that's not a great living, because it is. But these are people that they had to make real life decisions today that are going to impact maybe the rest of their careers, right? You're either staying and finishing what you started, or you have to leave right now and get on this plane, or you don't have a spot at the new place. I don't envy anyone who was put in that position. And again, it all could have been avoided. Lane Kiffin could have taken the ultimate. By the way, you know how Lane Kiffin could have avoided all this? He could have committed to Ole Miss long term. Or he could have taken what Keith Carter said from the beginning and said, look, after the Egg Bowl, I got 24 hours to make a decision, and it's a final decision. And I can't flip-flop, and I can't go both ways. Last thought on Kiffin, a couple more thoughts on Kiffin, because I do want to wrap and talk about some of the other coaching hires, and we'll certainly get to some of your questions, and we will prioritize super chats. So go ahead and drop your super chats in here. But one, this is driving me crazy. Can we stop blaming the calendar? Listen, smart people are blaming the calendar, and it's driving me crazy, and I'm chirping at him on social media. I don't even care. Aaron_Torres on Twitter. David Pollack, blame the calendar. Dan Orlovsky, my fellow UConn brother. I don't want to criticize these guys. They're freaking idiots, though, okay? I'm sorry. Stop blaming the calendar and start blaming the adult 50-year-old that's acting like a child. Why is that? Here's why you can't blame the calendar. The calendar not only was never designed for someone to leave a team good enough to win a national championship, there is no way to design a calendar for that scenario. This is the new world of college football. If you have a really good team, you're probably going to be coaching into late January, into mid-January at minimum, past New Year's, okay? There is no calendar that exists that says, hey, we can just move the coaching cycle until after the season. Whoever doesn't have a coach, Florida, LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Penn State, UCLA, the second the season ends, they want to get that coach in place and start working on next year. So no, the calendar isn't perfect, but the calendar isn't to blame, because the calendar is not built for somebody to have a top 7 or 8 team that can legitimately win a national championship. And I do believe Ole Miss could, with Lane Kiffin, decide to leave for another job. I chirped at Dan Orlovsky about this on Twitter, because Dan Orlovsky, blame the calendar. And listen, Dan, I like Dan, but I don't know how to say it delicately, but I like Dan. All I'll say is, I think great at breaking down tape. Great at breaking down tape. Let me leave it there. What I will say is this, and I said this to Dan Orlovsky, stop blaming the calendar. Blaming the calendar, this is the equivalent. And I said it on one of the shows last week. Imagine if today, so we're recording here on November 30th, if Sean McVay, the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams with 2, 3, 4 weeks left in the season, if it started to break that he was going to take the New York Giants job. Now, that would never happen, but let's just work under the scenario that for some reason, Sean McVay wants to leave the Rams and take the New York Giants job, okay? With 3, 4 weeks left in the season, well before the postseason, well before Sean McVay has a chance to lead the Rams to the Super Bowl, which despite losing to the Carolina Panthers, they do have a chance to win the Super Bowl, right? If Sean McVay, if it leaked out and the Rams gave Sean McVay, hey, we're going to give you 2 weeks, but by the end of this week or by the end of the regular season, you got to decide, are you staying with the Rams or are you going? And let's say Sean McVay gets to week 18 and the Rams are whatever, 14-3 and the number 1 seed in the NFL, whatever. They win the NFC West. If the Rams then said, listen, if you're not committing to us for this playoffs, you can't coach us in the playoffs. Nobody would be like, well, it's all the calendar's fault. It's not the calendar's fault. It's the coach that wants to leave the freaking Rams for the New York Giants. And it's the same with Lane Kiffin. Don't blame the calendar. At what point are we going to hold grown men accountable for their actions? Listen, I know I look young. I'm not as young as I used to be. Why am I the only one that was raised with some sort of decency and some sort of, hey, 1, treat people with respect, but then 2, sometimes you're not going to get your way, right? Didn't all of our parents say this to us when we were kids? The world isn't always fair. You don't always get what you want. The famous one, I used to date a girl who was a teacher. She said, you get what you get and you don't get upset. She said it to her students, told it to me every once in a while when I wasn't paying attention to her or whatever. But I just bring it up because you can't have it both ways, and stop making excuses for Lane Kiffin. And I do think, honestly, part of it is the NCAA is such an easy punching bag, right? Because if you criticize, Roger Goodell, or if you criticize Adam Silver, if you criticize Nick Saban or Kirk Herbstreit, if you criticize any individual, it could ultimately get back to them, and then you got a problem. If you just blame the NCAA, it's this organization with a bunch of offices. Nobody knows who's in charge. Like, I cover college sports. Who's the guy what is it? Baker, John Baker, Robert Baker? I don't even know who runs the NCAA. So it's an easy whatever, but stop making Lane Kiffin the victim. I could go on and on. Matt, we'll get to a couple Lane Kiffin questions in a minute. I do want to get to some of the coaching changes, but before we do, the last thing I'll say is this. I've been critical of Lane Kiffin. I think he's going to be excellent as LSU head coach. I think 2 things can be true. I think it was a disaster the way he left. I think Ole Miss fans have every right to be furious. But listen, I think he's going to be excellent as the LSU head coach. When we get to Monday, I don't know if we'll do a live show Monday, probably not again till Tuesday. We're going to turn the page to what Lane Kiffin is doing as LSU head coach. And I am going to be as optimistic about that hire as you can be about any hire. But today is about how he left. Today is about him being a child. Today is about the people of Mississippi gave you every single thing you wanted. And you not only left, you're allowed to leave, but the manner that you did was absolutely embarrassing.